It's not surprising that NBA All-Star games have some of the most insane players ever seen in the sport. After all, it's a weekend filled with the best of the best. So here are the craziest All-Star moments of all time. And of course, it's not an NBA show if there aren't any wild dunks, just like the dunk show LaVine and Gordon put on in 2016. Now, I understand that a lot of major stuff happened that year, and if you're a casual fan, you might have even missed this moment, but it was nothing short of insane as both players gave it their all that Saturday night. LaVine won his second dunk contest win in a row, relying mainly on dunks from an iconic distance, and he was on something else that day because he was jumping from the free throw line to compete an alley-oop from teammate Andre Miller, as well as a windmill and between the legs dunk. Nobody had ever even thought of trying that from the free throw line before, but Aaron Gordon also gave him a run for his money as he jumped over the Orlando Magic mascot not once, but twice. He nailed the between the legs and under the legs dunks on those attempts, and while LaVine finished with 5 perfect 50s and a 49 to fend off Gordon, both athletes collaborated to create one of the best dunk contest confrontations ever. But while these two were shining in the dunking contest, Shaq was in beast mode throughout the 1996 All-Star Game. The San Antonio Spurs looked like they were in for a great night that year. After all, they had the support of reigning MVP David Robinson and Sean Elliott, but Shaquille O'Neal, on the other hand, had other plans. Rather than bow to the Admiral on his home court, Shaq put the league's best big man on a poster. So while Michael Jordan won MVP honors in his first All-Star game since coming out of retirement, it was Shaq's crazy move that night that was making the headlines. By the end of the show, he'd scored 25 points, 10 rebounds, 2 blocks, and 1 facial on Robinson. If people were surprised MJ got MVP over him, you can imagine how good he was playing that night. But of course, that wasn't his only chance to get that honor. In fact, both he and Kobe buried the hatchet in their long-standing feud to share the MVP honors in 2009. By the time the All-Star Game arrived in Phoenix, both of these players had been clashing for 4.5 seasons. So when this once dynamic Lakers combo reunited for one more time, it's no surprise that we got to see some insane basketball. Bryant set game heights in points and steals, and just in 11 minutes off the bench, O'Neal had 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists to help the West defeat the East 146-119. The former teammates shared the award for their performance, and for one last time, fans got to see these two icons play in an amazing form together. The Shaq-Kobe duo was unbeatable, but the next player we're going to talk about came extremely close to writing history all on his own, because Paul George came extremely close to beating the event's all-time scoring record. The Indiana Pacers swingman finished with 41 points, which is just 1 point shy of Wilt Chamberlain's 42 points in 1962. And I doubt he'll ever forgive Greg Popovich for defending the way he did during the match. George mentioned that he had no idea he was so close to beating the record, because if he knew, he would have tried one last dunk before the buzzer went off. But that just makes the Big Dipper's record that much crazier, since there were no 3-point shots in his day, not that he needed one anyway. Instead, he dominated on the inside, shooting 17 of 23 from the field and grabbing 24 rebounds. So while Chamberlain's efforts couldn't stop the West from getting their victory of 150-130, it did take over 55 years for someone to top that score. The legendary Michael Jordan came close in 1988, but that wasn't the only reason he made headlines that year, because MJ dominated the All-Star weekend that year, and for good reason. The Chicago Bulls hosted the Windy City festivities with Jordan during probably his best individual season. That season, he led the league in scoring, steals, and minutes as he aimed for the first of his 5 MVP awards and his only Defensive Player of the Year award. Jordan meant business when he entered the court. court. He defeated Dominique Wilkins in the slam dunk contest on Saturday by flying from the free throw line not once, but twice. And the next night, they combined to lead the East to a 138-133 victory over the West. While Wilkins put up 29 points in 30 minutes, it was Jordan who actually stole the show, since he scored 40 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals, and 4 blocks. The Icon's performance was not only MVP worthy, but also one of the best ever seen in the mid-season showcase. But while his airness was nothing short of insane, I still prefer Magic's 1992 All-Star Game over MJ's, mainly because of all that was happening that season. He just announced his retirement in November 1991 after testing positive for HIV, and still, fans chose him as an all-star starter for the West, so of course, he delivered. Magic was the show from start to finish, leading the Western Conference in points and assists in a 153-113 victory in Orlando. He had amazing form throughout the weekend, and fans could tell he was playing like he had something to prove. Not only was he scoring like crazy, but he was guarding Thomas and Michael Jordan on possessions, assisted Dan Majerle in a layup, and getting his own three-pointer. Johnson was naturally named All-Star MVP, but it was his bravery that weekend that moved people all over the globe. Since then, we've seen some amazing All-Star games from these athletes, but there was actually a point in history when the All-Stars were ready to walk out of the game, because things were a lot tougher for basketball players back then when it came to their paychecks. If it wasn't for these daring 20 athletes in 1964, NBA players might not be the multi-millionaire moguls they are today. The All-Star Game in Boston that year was planned to air in primetime on ABC, except there were no players to put on a show, because just before the game, Boston Celtics' Tommy Heinsohn convinced the rest of the players to boycott. They were protesting the fact that the league's 9 owners refused to recognize and engage with the union. So while fans got ready to see their favorite players enter the court, those very same players were getting ready to walk off it. Those owners were begging them to reconsider their strike before yelling angrily at them to leave the changing rooms and head to the field. As the game was about to air, ABC executives threatened to cancel the broadcast. League Commissioner J. Walter Kennedy caved into the players' demands, which included a pension plan and better working conditions. Not only that, but also better schedules, and the chance for the union to negotiate contracts. That was enough to bring the players back on the court, with the East winning 111-107. But the true winners that night were all those players who joined the NBA during the next decades. And to think fans were so close to not having an All-Star game that year. Well, there you have it. These were the craziest NBA All-Star game moments of all time.